Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining in from all the corners of the world. It's so fun to watch people in the chat as they come in, and I see some return people from the last few weeks and some brand new names and faces. So thank you so much for coming to our third of four series on the proven strategies from the Women Connect Challenge. I think we're going to have a super fabulous time today. I'm really excited about the people that have joined us to talk about their experiences. And as you know from, if you've been through this series before, we're taking a bit of a different approach this time, where I'm trying to make sure that we're matching each of these proven strategies with both practitioners that are really actualizing the best practice, the most effective practices on the ground, as well as researchers that have been studying exactly why these things work. So really it's the why and the how. Delighted to meet some of you that I don't know already. My name is Revi Sterling. I've been running the Women Connect Challenge for USCID since its inception, and now we're 4 rounds in. Excited to see some Women Connect awardees like Ben, like AFCHICS. It's really excited to see people here, Janet, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with just a little bit of context on the Women Connect Challenge, some of the things we've teased out, and some resources as well. So let me go ahead, load here. And please chat away. Lots of us here. It's fun to see everybody. So I am just delighted that everyone is here. Oh, Natasha's joining. Perfect. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what this day is about. Obviously, you know, I'm a huge proponent of empowering women through technology and using technology in the service of empowering women, which, you know, it's kind of that Mobius strip of, you know, what are the barriers to women's technology access and use? And then how can we actually engage technology in a way that makes those on-ramps sustainable, appropriate, and developable, equitable, you know, to all populations. You know, we even have the USAID digital strategy calling out that we know that the current approaches in digital development keep exacerbating the gender digital divide, although no one wants to do that. We keep inevitably doing that by not paying attention to women's unique situations, intersectionality, and information wants and needs. So I'm really excited that we keep doing this work. And this work is built on, you know, 2+ decades of really standing on the shoulders of other giants. As you know, in our series 1 of this, I had Dr. Sophia Heyer on, who, I mean, she really wrote kind of the seminal paper about the gender digital divide in 1997. So none of these things are new. We just keep building an action base to complement the research base and try to realign donors, technology companies, practitioners, tech commentators, etc., to understand that what we've been doing in the past still isn't working. And now that more and more technology is coming to communities, now that we have digital strategies for all the digital sectors, it is so critical that we look at really the dynamics and the conditions of the gender digital divide and what we need to do to make sure we're not creating additional divides. So the Women Connect Challenge was really the first, from what I can tell, the first major bilateral program to focus on the social norms that keep women offline and underconnected and thus underempowered. And that was really important to me because if I look at all the other reasons for women's lack of connectivity, and we always know they're cited, it's cost, it's literacy, it's skills, it's cost, it's limit. We hear these things again and again. All of those are just rooted in the fact that there's such inequities in gender in these communities. And the gender and development organizations have known this forever. This is why they've been working on things like getting girl children to school and stopping female genital mutilation and tracking bride prices and making, you know, all of the things that those organizations have been doing have been around changing the social norms, which is exactly what we need to do as technologists with digital development approaches. So with the Women Connect Challenge, we've had 3 global rounds, and we have 1 round that's very India specific, and we'll be announcing the winners from that probably in the next month or so, but we have some on the call today. We've had over 1,000 proposals, and we have funded 16 specific countries. And really what it's come down to is these 5 effective practices that we've known about for 2+ decades, but still building the fact and still building that research base to say, these are the things, if you want to go in and make sure we're closing the gender digital divide, these are the things that really need to happen. So we've been holding this series of webinars with researchers and practitioners, and then a new group of people we're adding today that I'm calling the academic practitioner. You'll meet one. And we've been holding them on these 4 topics. Today, of course, is number 3, cultivating women's confidence to use technology through technology. And then next week, we have our last session on designing systems very specifically for women. We don't have one specifically on developing community support because that's a tenet that I think goes without saying for all of us in all of our strategies. Want to talk a little bit about those 16 countries that we're working in. Here's a list. Today we're going to be focusing on Viamo's efforts in Tanzania, so I'm super excited about that. The other thing that the Women Connect Challenge has spawned is a project between USAID and Microsoft that I've been running along with Stephanie Creed and Kendra Poole on the call to work with some of the Microsoft Airband partners, these ISPs and community networks in certain regions to make sure of the world, to make sure that we're bringing more women online and tracking their, the changes in their economic and social position vis-a-vis connectivity. So these are our current projects, and I can't wait to add our India winners to the list. Let's see. Last but not least, of course, USAID has been working on a series of information products to help people that are new to the gender digital divide. Certainly there's great research out there. I'm looking at people in the chat and going, wow, they're doing the amazing research. I like to quote Natasha a lot, et cetera. So it's really great to see everybody here. If you are interested, these are links and you'll be able to access these in the PDFs if you'd like to after this event. But let me go back to our strategies, just to keep these in mind, introduce some of our speakers today. And again, we're trying to do this thing where I'm focusing on a researcher first who sets the stage for really what we're talking about with cultivating women's confidence. And the first person that's going to do that is Dr. Araba. She's a principal researcher with Research ICT Africa, which is just such a wonderful premier research institution. She's also a principal research scientist at the University of Washington School. She's always been really passionate about digital and social inequalities and exploring ways to foster diversity and inclusion. I have loved, every time I go to a conference and she's there, I have to do the girly squeal before she even makes it to baggage claim. I'm always so excited to see her because she's just such a thoughtful, amazing researcher, and I know we're going to take a lot from her. She's done so much with the UNU, and the ITU equals. I'm so excited you're joining us, Araba. Will you take it away?
Thanks, Revi, for that lovely introduction. I'm going to start sharing my screen for a moment here. Perfect. Great. So before I begin, I'd like us to take a minute or so to consider some quotes that I'm going to share now and think about what it would be like to live in an environment in which these are the types of ideas circulating within the society and within your mind. So I'm going to just leave each for a few seconds. That. So these statements all come from men and women who participated in focus group discussions conducted late last year by Research ICT Africa and the Center of Gender Studies at the University of Rwanda. So I sort of want to emphasize that this is 2020, so not in the dark ages, but today. We were trying to understand the generally low levels of internet use and wide gender internet gap in Rwanda. In 2017, 5% of women in Rwanda were internet users compared to 12% of men. And I'll just say a little bit about the survey findings themselves. We found that a much higher proportion of women, 51% compared to 35% for men, considered lack of access to a computer or smartphone to be a barrier to their internet use. A similar proportion of men and women, around 30% each, felt primarily constrained by the cost of internet access. The next three top constraints for both men and women were, first, not knowing what the internet is, which was about 12% of men, 6% of women. Second, no interest in using the internet, which was 7% of men and less than 1% of women. And third, no time or too busy to use the internet, which was just under 4% of men and just over 4% of women. And I mentioned this to emphasize what the core barriers to access still seem to be for both men and women, and that's access to the devices and the cost of data. The lack of confidence itself, we didn't capture as an issue, partly because of how the survey was constructed. But the qualitative work we did to dig deeper revealed this to be a significant compounding factor, and one that we could say is layered on top of the basic access and cost issues. To put this in context, bear in mind that this is not a developing country problem. Research in Europe and North America also shows that compared to men and women, compared to boys and men, women and girls have lower self-efficacy or confidence in their digital skills, as well as in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths subjects in general. Even more interesting is that men tend to overestimate their skills and underestimate the skills of women, and women tend to underestimate their own abilities and skills as well. So this raises two questions for me. One is, to what extent is this really an issue of lack of confidence? And two, if it is an issue of lack of confidence, where does that lack of confidence come from? I don't have the answer to the first question, so I'm focusing today on what I think about the second question based on what we found in our research. So our focus group discussions with rural and urban, male and female internet users and non-users shed light on a range of interconnected issues, with emphasis on interconnected, contributing to the gender internet gap in Rwanda. Our main observation was a strong link between low female labor force participation, access to disposable income, and women's use of the internet. We found that gendered perceptions about women's digital needs and capabilities seem to significantly shape the way both men and women view the reality and the causes of gender digital gaps. And prominent amongst these was the view that women lack the confidence, interest, and motivation to use the internet. Although there were admittedly some participants who disagreed with this view, and the view was expressed by both female and male participants. But overall, this perception came most strongly from male participants. More interesting and troubling, male participants tended to present lack of confidence as a character flaw of women, while female participants were more likely to link it to the psychological effects of their life situation. So if you can imagine yourself constantly surrounded by the types of comments that I showed earlier, and you know, this is the context you're living in, and these thoughts and opinions are your daily reality. And perhaps it becomes understandable why women might appear to lack interest in or confidence to either use digital technologies or develop the skills that would enable them to use the internet meaningfully. I'm not a psychologist, But reflecting on our findings, I think there could be psychological implications emerging from three areas. So I'll go through them. First, unemployment and the associated lack of personal disposable income, perceptions about the value of productive versus reproductive work, and concerns about spousal relationships. So first, on unemployment, mobility, and lack of personal disposable income, we found a set of interactions around not having paid employment, low personal disposable income, and mobility outside the home that could be stunting women's interest in using the internet. Some of our participants described slow detachment from social engagement or personal development, resulting from loneliness, despair, discouragement, in addition to concerns about wasteful use of limited family funds. Second, on the value ascribed to reproductive and productive work, we found that the perception that unpaid domestic work, which is what most women do, is not productive work. The view that that's not productive work appears to provide justification for women, especially housewives, to be denied the means, whether in time or in funds, to access the internet. Thirdly, on concerns about maintaining peace at home, we observed perceptions that the internet, especially social media, is harmful to spousal relationships. And these concerns lead to restrictions on women's access, sometimes even domestic violence, and sometimes voluntary abstention by some women for fear of disrupting their marriages. Several participants also noted how the combined effect of being unemployed, not having the means to purchase the internet access at home, and the resulting lack of motivation to use the internet leads to their inability to build internet skills. So there's just this knock-on effect of everything. One can surmise that the real or perceived lack of digital skills then further reinforces their decision not to use the internet. So the confidence challenges in women, I would like to argue, may not necessarily be caused just by lack of skills, but of an environment permeated with these perceptions that diminish their self-concept. While for men, these perceptions seem to either justify the gender gap or place the blame on women. For women, these perceptions contribute to a vicious cycle that's fueling a sense of inadequacy, perceptions of non-relevance of the internet, and disincentivizing its use. In some cases, the outcome might look like lack of confidence, lack of interest, or lack of motivation, but maybe something else. So the main point I want to make today is that when we think of lack of confidence as a barrier to women's use of digital technologies, we should be careful not to frame it as an endogenous problem that women have to look inside, just have to look inside themselves to solve, or that women just have to be empowered to overcome, or that can be resolved simply by equipping women with digital skills. Focusing on these alone risks maintaining the erroneous view that women are flawed in some way that needs to be fixed, whereas the solution may lie more in addressing the deeper psychological damage that has been done to women's self-worth over time, and perhaps even more in changing the environment that has created this lack of confidence where it exists, and that environment that women have to contend with on a daily basis. Thank you.
Delay there. I was busy pushing buttons and trying to look. Really loved your presentation. I think these are such things to think about because development is so fundamentally, a psychosocial path that people are on. They're in one state and they want to go from here to there. If you don't have that confidence, you don't have the self-efficacy to start making those changes, that's a really hard place to be. I'm sure we've all dealt with women. I keep hearing these quotes, I'm not smart enough to do this. I'll break it. It's not for me. And it's really just got to be, it's just such a challenge for technology implementers, especially those of us really, who are dedicated, to this space. So thank you so much for setting the stage. I absolutely want to, I think you are a psychologist because you've been a psychologist for me in the gender digital divide with these issues for so long. So I'm going to introduce Hannah Metcalfe, who is the country director for Viamo, Tanzania. And Hannah's just amazing. I got to meet her as part of my journey going around the world meeting with our Women Connect One awardees. She's been responsible for running this program in Tanzania, and I really want to also call out Rachel Aladdin, who was our first contact at Tanzania, and who got to come here in DC and be part of our co-creation workshop, and was really the person that decided that, we should take a chance with IVR. IVR systems, if they can teach us about agriculture, and they can teach about health, and they can broadcast news, why aren't we using them as a trusted source to help women understand technology, and in doing so, build their confidence to use it? So I'm going to let Hannah take it from here. Her background, she's just really a true ICTD expert. She's been working at GSMA. She's done a lot of stuff and mobile phone solutions all over Africa and Asia. And I'm really excited for her to talk about what came out of this work with using IVR as a way to build confidence in women, even getting online for the very first time. So Hannah, take it away.
Thanks so much, Revi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my presentation. Give me 1 moment. Here we go. So for context, Viamo through Women Connect leveraged our 321 service, which is a free-to-user, voice-based information service offered in partnership with mobile network operators, or commonly known as MNOs, to tackle the digital gender divide between women and men. We specifically aim to target 3 barriers to women's usage of mobile phones, which were awareness of mobile internet, low digital literacy, and the perception that mobile internet is not relevant to the lives of women. And we did all of this while providing women with valuable life-saving information. So Viamo launched the 321 service in Tanzania in 2017 in partnership with Vodacom, working with our content creator partners such as Catholic Relief Services, Bongo Kids, DKT International, and the GSMA to develop content on a whole range of topic areas such as agriculture, family planning, education, financial literacy, as well as many other topics. I'm really proud to say that we now have about 200,000 unique listeners per month on the service, of which about 48% are women. And our theory of change was pretty simple. We proposed that if Viamo embeds information about mobile internet and digital literacy into content that women have already reported they're interested in or are already accessing on a regular basis, then we can tackle the 3 barriers to mobile internet usage that I just mentioned. So whenever Viamo agrees to host new content on 321 service, we always go through a content creation workshop where we convene our primary partner, who is funding the content, so in this case, Women Connect, content matter experts, and of course, members from the relevant ministries. So our main goal here is to not only explain and introduce the 321 service and to have the new content endorsed, but also it's an opportunity for those attending the workshop to actually draft the messages collaboratively. And we try to have content experts, but also people who can translate those expertise into languages that we know our users are going to hopefully understand. And for Women Connect, Viamo conducted a baseline IVR survey of 1,000 women to understand knowledge, attitudes, and practices of women and mobile technology, including digital information sources and barriers, as well as what information women and girls stakeholders desire to have access to in Tanzania. And using that information, we then held this content workshop with female community representatives, expert INGO, NGO, CSO representatives, relevant ministry counterparts, Viamo's digital literacy experts, and then other key stakeholders to create localized women-driven messages for the service. we hired a gender specialist and workshop facilitator to help us maximize the impact of this workshop. And our main goal was during the workshop for participants to really be in the shoes of one of our female 321 users and to think creatively about how this person would want to improve their digital literacy. To ensure that the workshop objects were all addressed, the workshop facilitator employed a wide range of methodologies, which allowed us to adopt multiple approaches using design thinking tools. And one of the main initial discussions about digital literacy and hosting this content on the 321 service was the desire for having an additional theme on digital literacy. So originally we thought we would have messages around different topic areas and embed digital literacy content in there. But actually we decided, and it was the kind of opinion of those that attended the workshop, that it may complicate the content and confuse women, and actually also make the government approval process more challenging. So as a result, we decided that we would create the digital literacy messages separately and then explore ways that this content may be embedded on the service at a later date. So we first asked everyone to spend some time really defining digital literacy so we could be sure that everyone was on the same page. Each participant had the opportunity of sharing her understanding of digital literacy through developing statements, and then these statements were later discussed, then grouped under themes such as the internet, being online, accessing information online, safety and data. Secondly, and in my opinion most importantly, we looked at characterization, so whereby the workshop facilitator created 4 groups that were responsible for creating characters, who either fell into the character category of a Tanzanian woman who is digitally literate or a Tanzanian woman who is not digitally literate. And these were some of the ideas that we came up with to help put that woman in the center of our content creation process. So the digitally literate woman in Tanzania was defined as owning a smartphone, able to read and write, employed, possibly even self-employed, modern, open-minded, progressive, more likely to live in urban areas. And then the not digitally literate Tanzanian woman was defined as not owning a smartphone and likely to not own their own phone, but possibly has access to a shared household mobile device, likely to be low income, traditional, low level of literacy, more likely to be rural, and possibly working in the informal sector. And so from these discussions, the participants of the workshop created the character Amina as the best persona, which embodies a Tanzanian woman who is not digitally literate and who would possibly benefit from more information about her phone and gaining digital skills. So Amina is 29 years old. She lives in Mtwara in the south of Tanzania. She is a housewife and a farmer. She uses her phone for calls, sometimes texting, and with the help of her husband and an agent, she sends money to her mother on her phone. She's totally dependent on her husband when it comes to her phone, beyond making simple phone calls to friends and family. She cares about her children, and she really wants to know more about how she can keep them healthy. She is hesitant to make her own decisions, as her husband is the main decision maker. We asked workshop participants to really keep Amina in mind when they were developing these messages, and whenever there was any debate about whether a message would be understood or whether it fitted, we really encourage everyone to go back to this idea of Amina as the person we're creating content for. So once all workshop participants felt confident that they understood the goals of the workshop, we then invited our 321 product manager to basically share our leading principles for creating content on 321. And the main components we emphasize in these workshops is that all messages should be easy to understand, short, simple and concise, easy to remember, address the target audience, and call for reasonable action. We then asked participants to explore 2 key thematic areas for both the selected character Amina and women like Amina. So firstly, what are the barriers for Amina to become digitally literate? And participant feedback was phone ownership, data price, network, power supply. And then what would motivate women to get online, use the service? And some of the topic areas that people came up with were gossip columns, guidance on how to take care of your child, cooking guidance, relationship management, reproductive health, fashion, and financial literacy. The message development walkthrough, along with the additional group and individual work, resulted in us being able to create 20 messages. And I won't go through all of them, but you can see them on the screen now. These were the main key areas that we created messages for. And then after the workshop, these messages were handed over to our production team, who stylized and recorded them using local voice actors, and all messages were created in Kiswahili. So once the messages are created, in my opinion, this is when the important part happens, and we actually put them to the test, and we go out into the field to really assess whether these messages are the right fit before we put them on the 321 service. So the digital literacy boot camps we created were held in Bagamoyo, and for those that don't know, that's a more rural area just outside of Dar es Salaam along the coast. And we conducted these boot camps with 24 women in 2 separate groups of about 10 to 12 women each. Each woman was given a questionnaire on the first day of the boot camp to measure their understanding of digital literacy, and before the start of the training, and then given the questionnaire at the end of the boot camp to measure their knowledge acquired after the camp. The camps were conducted in the form of group sharing experiences and discussions, and were really practical. I mean, a lot of the women had access to the phones, they had a chance to try it out in person, but there was also a lot of time for them to convene and to discuss a lot of the challenges as to why perhaps they're not as digitally literate as they would like to be. And our findings from this boot camp were that more than 95% of participants who owned mobile phones mainly used them for dialing and texting only. 10 women out of the 24 depended on their partners to do mobile money transactions because they didn't feel confident enough due to the lack of knowledge. But their perception changed after the camps because most of them stated that they will be monitoring their own mobile money accounts moving forward. And then the Endline survey showed that at the end of the boot camp, once they've gone through the 4-day training, that 90% of the participants actually improved their understanding of digital literacy. And one woman I really wanted to highlight in particular said that, I sell some fabrics and vitenge, but I use my husband's phone to receive payment from my customers because I don't have enough knowledge on how it works. And sometimes it becomes difficult to get my money on time because my husband is the one managing it. But from now on, I will be telling them to send the payment direct to my phone because I have understood how to use it, and I will be getting my money on time, and I will save it accordingly. And then 4 women out of 24 said that they thought smartphones were designed for people who were more advanced in technology or educated, living in urban areas, and certainly not them because they seem so complicated to use. But while we were conducting the camps and got hold of the smartphones for practical, nearly all of the women immediately shifted their mindset and promised to go and purchase them. So the content has now been live on the service for well over a year. We've had 160,000 listeners to the content already, and the most popular content, with about 30% of people selecting it, is being connected to the internet, which I think is a particularly interesting one because obviously most of our callers are coming in through IVR and hopefully suggesting that they want a shift to the internet. So thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I have a feeling that we may have lost our moderator, so I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm the 3rd presenter, Laura Hosman, and I have a presentation to share with you as well. All right. So I'm going to flip things and start with statistics and end with a story. Let's see. All right.
I'm back here, Laura. Are you there?
Okay. I can keep going, Remy. This is fun.
I just want to give a little intro because I can't even imagine. I mean, we haven't done a 3rd speaker in these series until today, but I had to have Laura come and join us because she's that perfect blend of academic practitioner who, is, in one hand, really studying how all this works, and at the same time is working with students and creating amazing technologies to address this and so many other issues. So I just, even Laura's not a Women Connect Challenge winner, should be a winner of all things all the time, but I just wanted to bring her perspective in as a third party who espouses these practical strategies, these proven strategies we've talked about, but just mostly to prove that a lot of these things aren't USAID's findings. These are the findings from all of us that have been in the trenches for so long. And honestly, with Laura, you couldn't find a better person with more experience, both, in the research space, in the lab, and then on the ground. So I'm a huge fan of Laura. I just want everyone to know that. I can't really imagine, I can't remember when we met. I feel like you've always been in my life in this space. Now she's at Arizona State University, but probably lots of people have tracked your career throughout. So I will be quiet now. That was not what I was going to say, but I really am just glad that you're here.
Ravi, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Wow. All right, we'll start again. So the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, which is a UN body, estimates that about half the world's population has never connected to the internet. And by the way, the UN defines you as connected if you've connected once in the last 3 months. So these are really widely varying levels of being connected, right? But again, let's talk about what does internet use look like if you're in a rural, low-income country. And some of our speakers have already alluded to this, but if you have the internet, it is on your phone, you pay for it by the byte, there is no such thing as unlimited. And since it's expensive, well, you're not surfing to edifying educational sites that you don't know exist. So believe it or not, I don't actually think that this 50% of the world, 4 billion people being unconnected is the problem, because it's focused on the wrong thing, access. So very similarly here, simply having access, just being connected isn't what's empowering. It takes a mindset change, a behavior change, capabilities change, skill building. These are what contribute to self-confidence and self-efficacy. So in my work, I thought, well, let's go through the schools to see if we can build these empowering ICT-related skills. And unfortunately, the news with schools is even more grim. In this report from a few years ago, the ITU estimated that over 90% of schools across the entire developing world don't have internet connectivity. But again, I don't think that this is the problem. This is getting closer to what the true challenge is. Teachers at these unconnected schools don't magically have internet-related skills. So what's really missing, what the real problem is that people who haven't used the internet yet are also largely missing the skills to navigate, identify, evaluate, effectively use, and create information. This is actually the definition of information literacy. These skills don't magically just appear from being connected to the internet. And as you've also heard from a couple of the other speakers today, let's be honest, if you're coming online for the first time today, somewhere in the world, what does the internet look like to you? It's Facebook. And actually, this isn't a very accurate picture because it would be on your phone. For the past 5 years, everywhere I work, I've been carrying out interviews related to this topic. And I ask the interviewees a question. If there's any internet connectivity at all in your village or community, what is it used for? So around the world, 7, 8, 9 different countries for the past 5 years, 100% of my respondents answer Facebook. And then if they keep talking, they start telling me about the problem of fake news in their community and how they don't know what to do about it. Just for comparison, about 20% of the respondents mentioned Google being used in their community. So for the majority of people I've spoken with around the world, Facebook is the internet. They get all of their news from there. And while we on this call know that there can be serious negative outcomes, as you just heard from Hannah, about getting one's only information from the for-profit, emotion-driven echo chamber that is social media, how do we combat this? Yet I do want to be clear that I believe education has to be part of the answer here. So here's what I believe: that we can make a reality where offline is better than online, especially for educational settings, especially for first-time users, even as they're building internet-ready skills. We can make a space that is welcoming, that is safe. Hey, no cyberbullying, viruses, or age-inappropriate content here. A place that is both localized and relevant, and people can really see themselves in this space. It's a place filled with only educational, inspirational, confidence building, and skill building information. What is this magical place? I call it a library. It's a place where all of this information is pre-curated with the library users in mind. Now, some to many of you who are on this call will have grown up with access to a library. Many of the skills you use to make meaningful, empowered use of the internet, you learn from having access to a library, from reading, searching, researching, browsing in a safe environment. You benefited from all of that information that someone had thoughtfully curated for you. How empowering is that? Many people around the world lack access to libraries in their schools, in their communities, but this need not remain the case. Libraries can be where the most important and empowering skills are built. All right, sorry, I need to go back one. The only way that we're going to see long-term quality of life improvement and empowered development is once these skills are built. When people have the agency to define what quality of life improvements mean to them, and then the knowledge and agency to effect that change in their lives and their communities. So the initiative that I run is called SolarSPELL. It is a global educational initiative based at Arizona State University, and it comprises appropriate technology, relevant content, and local capacity building in order to transform education, build information literacy, and internet-ready skills, because without those skills, the internet will not be a force for empowerment. We carry out capacity building over the long haul that's needed through in-field partnerships and a train-the-trainer approach. And this is our mission, but I wanted to point out that student success is central here, both globally and at ASU. Our secret sauce, in fact, is engaging about 100 university students every year on every aspect of this initiative, from curating content to writing code to making videos to testing hardware and more. And believing that libraries are public goods, we've found our best home within a public institution that defines itself by whom it includes, not whom it excludes. So very quickly, how does it work? There's a solar panel on the back that provides power to the battery that you're seeing, the white battery there, which provides power to a microcomputer, which now functions as a server, and it serves up an offline localized Wi-Fi hotspot that any Wi-Fi capable device, like the smartphone you're seeing here, can connect to and freely surf the educational library's thousands of items. It looks and feels like being online, so users can search, explore, and learn in a safe, offline digital library. And if you were in the same room with me, I would say, please take out your smartphone and look for a signal called SPELL. It's Wi-Fi. You open up your favorite web browser, type in 10.10.10.10, then enter, and you start exploring. So this is the easy to navigate website that opens, no passwords, everything's open access, downloadable, shareable, pre-curated, prioritizing the educational needs of our users and their content requests. So what kind of things would you see in this library? Videos and PDFs on all kinds of educational information, but also prioritizing building information literacy and internet-ready skills, sustainability and climate change related resources, gender equality and diversity and inclusion content, and then we can also combine these to address both gender equality and sustainability or climate change. And again, all of these are localized whenever possible. So I'm going to close by sharing a story of SolarSPELL use from Yap, one of the 4 federated states of Micronesia. It was shared with me by Olivia, a Peace Corps volunteer, who was living there with her host family. And it might seem pretty amazing to be able to live on a tropical island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean surrounded by such breathtaking beauty. But this is also a very isolated locale. There's no internet here. So Olivia's host mother had been watching videos on the SolarSPELL and came across one that hit a little too close to home. So she watched it again. Then she came to Olivia and told her about this video that she wanted to watch together with both Olivia and her daughter. The video was about sexual assault. It showed Pacific Islander women talking about this issue, not accepting it, saying that it's wrong, coming together as a community of women and confronting both the attacker and the issue. Well, in Olivia's family, the daughter had been sexually assaulted, but it was considered taboo to talk about this on this remote, isolated island. But this mother knew that that just wasn't right. So when she watched a video with other Pacific Island women not accepting this and doing something about it, well, now she felt like she could do something. So she, Olivia, and her daughter organized a movie watching night and invited all of the women in the community to come. And this was the video they showed. And afterwards, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, because it turns out that this problem was a problem that affected nearly every family. But since it had been taboo, no one talked about it. But now they had seen it being done by women they could identify with. They knew what they could do, and the floodgates were open. Olivia shared with me that big changes came about on the island after that movie night. So I know that offline can be better than online for safely bringing empowering information, teaching digital literacy, and building internet-ready skills, building self-confidence and self-efficacy to bring about real change, because we're already doing it. Thank you.
So I just want to show everybody this connectivity thing is ridiculous, even though I really do have 100 feet of Cat5 connecting me to the world. I mean, if we can't use technology, how are we possibly expecting everybody in the world to wait for connectivity to then get online, to then feel, oh my gosh, this isn't a place I should be, I don't know enough. I mean, I can't tell you that, you know, my phone, especially during COVID, has really, you know, it blows up every day on WhatsApp, because women around the world that I've worked with don't know how to distinguish the fake news from the bad news, don't understand, you know, we're so used to this search mechanism, right? I mean, I just think if you look at our experiences, mostly as a Western internet with a desktop, you know, we go to Google, we go to Bing. I don't know who goes to Bing. Some people go to Bing. We go to other things, and, you know, we type this in. I cannot stress enough to people, oh, you have to go to that thing on the second screen of your phone that has a little circle. You type that in. What are the keywords? I mean, I'm so tired of explaining what keywords are, because they're just anathema to a normal way of browsing and looking at the way if you've been raised on mobile phones as your internet, or if you're used to Facebook. So we have this model that we expect people to you know, build their confidence. When they do that, the search results they get back, I have to explain, oh, don't believe anything you read online, but use these keywords to try to get something. We have just made such a mess of exporting how we use the internet to how everybody else in the world uses the internet. And no wonder people are terrified to use it, or think that they're stupid. Or what I hear in lots of projects with hand-me-down phones that have come from somebody who worked in another country is, my phone speaks French. I don't even speak French. You know, so again, that confidence when you're working with low-resource women and low-resource communities. I love how all three of our speakers really pressed on that. Hannah, you have so many questions about the Viamo service. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the boot camps? And Laura, if you want to chime on as well, or Araba, about, you know, how do you even get women to come to some of these boot camps? Because I also feel like we've done so many focus groups around ICT and technology, and we're not the only ones doing that. How did you get women to, how did they self-select into these boot camps?
Yeah, so we did a bit of a blended approach. So we worked with village leaders and community leaders in this particular area in Bagamoyo, and we went and spoke to them and said, you know, do you think this is something that would be of interest? Do you think that within your community women would be willing, and, you know, it would be beneficial if they would be involved in learning more about digital? And, you know, to their credit, they were very open and receptive to it. So we were able to recruit through that. And then through our service, people can register and opt in to be contacted to give feedback feedback, to take part in surveys, to tell us what content they want, for a whole host of stuff. And so we filtered out those registered users in this area and contacted some of them and said, you know, you already know the 321 service. Would you be interested to come along to understand further how you could enhance your digital literacy skills beyond IVR? So it was sort of a blended approach across those two categories. Revi, I think you might be muted.
Of course I am, because technology absolutely hates me today. It's just one of those days. This is why we have live events. Araba, I want to go back to a question that Dwayne asked, because Dwayne has joined us on other webinars, and I'm glad to see him back today. From your experience in this space overall, if you're a startup in this world, if you're just coming on to ICT for development, or what we call digital development now, how do you begin even looking at the digital gender gap if you're a business? Like, what are the things you need to do? What would be like the top 5 things to be super aware of so we don't keep making the same mistakes again and again? Can you give Dwayne and some of us just some of your most effective practices in this space? You've seen so many good and bad projects.
Yeah, I think perhaps the most, the number one thing I'd say is start within your own organization. So if you are not practicing gender equality in the work that, with your own staff, not only in the hiring, sort of having a diversity of staff, but also in the way you treat your male and female employees, then you're not modeling the behavior you want others to practice anyway. So I'd say start there, and usually if you have that, you kind of have already sensitized yourself to gender issues, and so when you actually go out to try and do the work, it's going to kind of bleed through. I think what happens most of the time is that we spend our time pointing fingers at others or other institutions, other communities, and because we're doing that pointing, we can't see what's happening within, and then our work is ineffective. So I think I'd probably say that's the one key thing, is just start at home, and then you can start looking outward. But the other thing is this issue about assuming that technology is going to solve the problem, I think, is the other issue to keep in mind. That we are in the US and we have technology problems. So if we are having these sort of challenges and we consider ourselves to be fairly literate, how much more, someone in a rural village somewhere who, doesn't have the facilities or the background that we have. So the issue should not be the technology, but rather the conditions into which the technology is being introduced. And if you've addressed that, then you don't have to come in and say, we want to achieve gender digital equality. We want to achieve gender equality. That's the whole point. And if we have gender equality, then it affects everything, and you don't have to deal with it in these very siloed manner, siloed way. So I think those will be my main suggestions for starters.
Yeah, I love that. Hannah, Laura, anything you want to share to that? I mean, you work in places where, the gender equality, issues are very rampant. But now, Tanzania has a female president. What do you see with that, Hannah?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to comment.
No political commentating on this.
I completely agree with what Araba said, because often as a technology provider, people come to you because they identify gaps and they think technology can fill them. And often, as much as I'm a big believer in technology, I refuse to offer technology solutions if they don't apply. And that happens a lot. I mean, a lot of our agriculture work, I'm really, honest about I'm really happy that if a farmer's gone and had a training day and they've seen it in the field and they just need a reminder to reach out to their field officer or to know where to buy seeds, I think that's a great service for us. I'm not going to create messages on how you prune coffee bushes while listening to your phone, you know, like I wouldn't dream of seeing information and learning that way. So we can't expect just because people don't have other means that that's the best way that they should learn. And so I think there's always a role for technology, but you can't put it in front of the other needs that need to be addressed.
Absolutely agree. Laura, anything you want to add to that?
Just, I mean, yes, of course, I'm in agreement. Techno-solutionism is a recipe for failure. So
what we just keep doing it. Okay, how do we get people to stop? I mean, the nice thing is that everybody on this call, I think, agrees or probably understands that they need to educate themselves more on this and can be more of a proponent of the fact that, you know, if you lead with a technology rather than a human problem, it's not going to work out very well. Other things about safeguarding women and girls. We have a question from Jennifer Elms here about, you know, how organization integrated digital safeguarding measures. I look all the time, and I'm always surprised in digital literacy training. And I'm so glad that the Viamo program has a piece in this, and so does SolarSPELL around kind of cyber hygiene. The amount of frauds that I have seen increase during COVID time because you have desperate people in desperate situations. I mean, I don't even know what the question is there, except that it's so heartbreaking, and it's just something that we really need to realize affects women disproportionately. I talk to women all the time that say, I just gave an org that, you know, in a different country, $10, maybe the equivalent of their week's work, because they're going to pray for me to get a job. And you just want to be like, I understand that the internet brings us all closer together, but these are such terrifying things to hear because it delegitimizes technology in the long run. So I really love the fact that you're all highlighting the fact that there is this need to educate and, in Viamo's case, to really educate users on what is out there, what are they getting into, so that you go in with full choice, because I do really believe that development is freedom. It is a choice mechanism. You shouldn't get online with little tiny bits of information, because then you're actually somewhat dangerous to yourself, to your communities. You can put yourself at risk. We talked last week about how so many communities have banned women's cell phone use or have limits on it because the internet content is out there is seen as immoral, things like that. So I think this is actually very, very germane that we need to almost have pre-digital literacy training so that people really do understand what is out there, what are the benefits, and then to have that sandbox that offline, online solutions like SolarSPELL offer is huge, because then you do build up the confidence and you are getting information at the same time. You're not putting yourself at risk of all these things, of online gender-based violence, things like that. And you build up that confidence to say, I don't need to stand for that. I can actually click that window. So I am delighted. Araba, Hannah, Laura, thank you. I know we didn't get to all the questions. Dwayne, I think you're having, I know I didn't quite answer your questions 100%, but let's follow up offline and chat more. Thanks everybody for coming. Next week, we'll have our last one, and it's going to feature looking at very specific women designing technologies for women. So we're going to have as our researcher, Dr. Indrani Medithies from Microsoft Research, who's been a friend for a long time. We're going to feature Molly Health and Tara Hopkins talking about the social network created specifically for low literacy women in Bamako slums around health information. And they were not a technology organization. They were a health organization looking to see if technology could help unconnected women connect, and sort of her stories about that. And then our academic practitioner will be Osama Mazan from the Digital Empowerment Foundation, who looks a lot at using emojis and emoticons and other script type languages for low literate populations. And we know that the world's most literate, the most illiterate are also women. So please join us next week. Let's take it out with a little video teaser of that. And thank you so much, Laura, Hannah, Araba. I owe you big. Apologize to everybody for all the tech advice, and have a wonderful Thursday.